Hey Nerdpreneurs, Chris here. In today's episode, we spoke with Nerdpreneur Hope Christofferson, a full-time professional artist with over 100,000 followers on Instagram. If you're hearing this, it means you're not currently on our subscriber feed, and will only be hearing part of our conversation with Hope. In order to access full episodes of the Nerdpreneur podcast, you'll need to join our awesome Nerdpreneur board at patreon.com/nerdpreneur. There you'll find our private RSS feed to add to your favorite podcast app, along with other exclusive board member content. Yes, it costs money, but we don't run ads on Nerdpreneur, and this podcast is made possible entirely through the support of our board. So if you enjoy what we are doing here, please consider becoming a board member and supporting the one and only nerdy business podcast in the world. Keep it nerdy. Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Life's a game, so I'ma take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first, so let them rap a verse so they can all be heard.
My nerdy passion is a mix of music and storytelling.
Yeah, my nerdy passion basically is drawing.
We are dice retailers.
Correct. I'm a breeder of tarantulas, importing tarantulas and some other critters.
I am a harpist. I do mainly Celtic harp.
So the experience that I'm currently creating and manifesting is D&D in a castle.
I'll let you guess, but yeah, D&D. I do a lot of that.
I am a small, independent board game designer.
Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Welcome to Nerdpreneur, where we have fun conversations with people making money with their nerdy passion. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Frank.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest, artist Hope Christofferson. Welcome to Nerdpreneur.
Hello, friends. Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. So, Hope, what is your nerdy passion?
Ooh, okay. Well, distilling it right now, because it always changes, it is creature design, fantastical, biological creations out of watercolor. Sometimes I venture into ceramics, but with life lately, I've been using pencil, paper, and watercolor, and then a little bit of Photoshop to create field notes that are they're sort of scientific, but all the things in there are mythological. So, Pegasus and unicorn and worms and wyverns and all of those sorts of things.
That is so cool. Like we originally, I think, met at a festival where we're walking by and I saw your art and I was like, I've not seen anything like this, but it gave me renditions of like if Darwin was off in the jungles of whatever and was like drawing or writing scientific notes on something that was like a unicorn or a dragon or, like you were saying, these mythical creatures. And I just thought that is such a cool concept for art. I'm really curious, how did you get started into designing that, or how did that come to you as far as an idea?
Well, okay, this is one of those things where it's like it's actually been years in the making, and sometimes as artists we don't realize that we're on like a track until you look back and you're like, oh, wait a second, what have I been doing all this time? It's just been for fun. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I have all these things. So, I think growing up in the woods probably inspired this. My parents, my dad is, he had his college as a chemist and I homeschooled. So I had more of a sciencey background. I didn't have artists in my family. But, I was attracted to Lord of the Rings and I love Narnia, and I had those like Spiderwick Chronicle books and the Dragonology books, the Wizardology books. So, in my head, sometimes I regret this because I think that being an artist, it has its ups and downs. In my childhood head, I started to just believe like, ooh, okay, like I like science. I know that's how adult people have real jobs, but maybe I could figure out magical science, and that could kind of be a thing. So so I guess I always just love nature, and you get the Darwin thing there. So I've always had an interest in botany and evolutionary biology and animals and whatnot. That is where I've found so much peace, is going out camping, going out hiking, and so to combine watercolor, which is easy to run around with my exercise exploration practice of literally running around the woods looking at mushrooms or squirrels or deer. It just kind of happened pretty organically, right? And now here I am. So yeah, long story short, that's sort of how it happened. The first field note I made was like 2 years ago, I'd say, and then they've just been going on ever since. And so I'm working on a tarot set and a book right now.
Wow.
I have a quick tangent. The already just starting, and I already got a tangent
let's
for
do
you.
it. Let's do
Okay,
it.
so when you go out and you do your backpacking or camping, do you do painting with your watercolors on the go like that?
Yes. Yep. I
Okay.
do.
So do you ever use like the water from a local like lake or anything?
Yeah, that's cool that you thought to ask that, but I do. I've actually been to the Bighorns quite a bit because they're not too far from where I live, and I'll like dip my paper in the river water and then like pour like a French press coffee. You can make camping
Yes.
really fun. Yeah, and I'm like, whoa, I'm imbuing it with like the magic of the material of the place.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
thinking, so my mind immediately goes to like, of course, there's like Fey Wild and all of that, but like more on a Earth setting is a lot of the creatures that you talk about in your social media are like inspired by different cultures. And if you could go to the place of the culture of its like home, and then you say, this is actually from like the lake that supposedly the lady of the lake was at, and
Yeah,
where
oh
the
my gosh.
unicorn dipped and drank, in the
Mhm.
witness or in the presence of the lady of the lake, and you're like, this is actually that water. It's like, whoa, that's a
I mean,
premium.
that's pretty meta. Yeah, like that's like a really hardcore nerd. Like I'm literally gonna like travel all the way to like Loch Ness and go and paint
Hell
Nessie, right?
yes.
Like in a little
Hell
boat.
yes.
I need to do a Kickstarter or something like, hey guys, fund me so I can go to the source of magic and find these things, like a Discovery Channel show.
Or you just get a patron, like a wealthy patron, somebody out there who's like, I really want this painting, literally from
Oh,
Loch Ness.
That's a hell of a
yeah.
commission,
Hey,
right?
I know,
Yeah.
right? Like
Some people will
sending me
do
there.
it.
That's true. That's true. So if anybody's listening and they want to send me on an adventure to an abandoned castle where I can paint a ring wraith or something, just let me know. I'll be there. I'll do that. That's gorgeous. I absolutely
All right.
love it. Yeah.
Had to drop that nugget in the beginning before I lost it. Okay, now let's carry
Beautiful.
on back to how all of this started.
So were you saying that you did you do art in school, or like when did you start dabbling with watercolors and turning
Yeah.
getting to be an artist?
So I did go to an undergraduate school called Blackville State University, pretty close to where I grew up. It's in Spearfish, South Dakota. Wonderful little school in a cute little town. And I got my undergraduate in studio art. So during that time, I was always the fantasy illustrator. A lot of other people ended up kind of like, amazing. They ended up doing more abstract style stuff. So I sort of felt like a fish out of water in the program because, I was making zines that were very based around, literal interpretations of things like D&D. And it was interesting. I was definitely strange there. Didn't quite fit in. And, but I found so many friends, right? Like it was a really, really interesting experience. And then I took a gap year because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to a master's program. I think that's a thing that a lot of people really need to think hard about before they jump into one in the art world. And that's something we can talk about too, because it is a big decision and, it leads you to being a professor down the road. Or it can really help you with your practice.
What
But
is one of the things about it that makes it so hard, like such an obstacle to like overcome
oh,
for
you
like
mean like
mentally to accept to do it?
Oh, do you have to do it? Well, so I actually recently I got into a master's program, right? Like I took a gap year. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go to a master's program. I traveled around Europe. I did a residency making dragons in Denmark. And then I came back to the hills and I was just like, oh, am I going to apply? I'm not sure. And then I started applying and I got into a couple places and I ended up deciding to go to Arizona State University or University of Arizona down in Tucson. And I wasn't actually excited about it, which is really weird. I should have been. If you're not excited to go to a master's program, don't do it, guys.
Yeah.
Like I can give you guys so much advice, but as young creatives, I think that like we all just have to live through life and make those choices and those experiences and just kind of be like, well, now I'm wise. It was painful, but I'm very wise. So what happened was, like, before I got into the master's program, my field notes started to take off, right? I started to get offers from publishers to make tarot sets. And then I also started to get offers to design illustrations for books too, through Barnes and Nobles or through Quarto or Penguin. And for me, that was such a huge deal, right? I had
That
never.
is huge.
Well, you do it, and then you're kind of like, oh, okay, this is what it is. And now I'm still questing for my next thing. So I'm like, okay, I want to make something for me now. But at the time, it was a really big deal, and I was like, I don't want to get a master's degree, so I dropped out.
School's expensive too. Like, I think we just haven't addressed that either, that there's a huge investment that schools ask of you to go through, say, a higher level artistic program. And I don't know, as someone, it's funny because I did go to school and I did all that stuff, but I question sometimes whether how important is
It was
school
worth it.
artistic in the artistic journey. And so, yeah, as somebody who's a working artist and does this, I'm curious, like, where do you see the relationship between, say, professional training in a school and becoming a real artist?
Did you get a master's?
No, I haven't got a master's, but I did consider
Okay.
going. I did theater in school, and then I almost
Okay.
went to master's for theater, and I opted out because of the cost. That was the big barrier for me because it was going to cost me something around the nature of like 30 some odd thousand to go to East 15 acting school in England, which I got into, which was great, but it was just like,
Yeah.
holy, that's so much money to go and do for an acting degree, you know?
Yeah, because you're kind of like, what am I guaranteed at the end, right? Well, and that's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and it is a very, very personal decision. It really depends on like what you need, like almost regardless of the money, right? Like, let's say it's free, or let's say it's 50 grand a year. Put that aside. Really, really, really ask yourself, what do you want to get from this degree? Like, ask yourself, do you want the job that this degree will give you? Like, really, truly, because even outside of the money, it is the time, you know? And make sure that like you love what the professors have done, or there's something specific about the program, the location that really like speaks to your inner child soul, right? Because if you're doing that for yourself, it's such an act of like, hey, I believe in myself. This is such a privilege to be able to create, to be able to share like my enthusiasm with the world. There's not many artists out there. I think when you get into a master's program or you are living in an artsy part of a city, you feel like maybe everybody's an artist, but we're pretty few and far between. So if you want to invest in yourself and put that time in because you know that, okay, I'm doing this so I can be a professor to inspire other people, or I love what this person has done, so I want them to mentor me, then yes, go 100%. My issue was that I kind of just randomly like shot off applications to a few schools. One really, really great program in St. Louis, the Sam Fox School of Design. I've gotten into that twice actually, because I've yeah, because I always think about it. But it's super expensive, right? And I don't really know if I'm in love with St. Louis. And then the University of Arizona one, actually, it was funded. So I was working teaching to pay for tuition, which was an awesome deal, right? Like I was over
Yeah.
the moon. And that shows you something, right? Where it was like, okay, suddenly this huge obstacle, because for me, it was very cost indicative. It was like, oh man, like what if I don't get a professorship right after I graduate? And, it was all for nothing. And then what if it's just an adjunct position? And then I was like, oh, you're like stressing out about being a teacher and you might not even really want to be a teacher. But the reality is that if you're going back to like, do you need school to be an artist? If you spend a lot of time on your craft and you get really good, there's always people who want to learn from you. I like some of the illustrators I look at, like most of them don't have master's degrees. They just put so many hours in and they're so talented that like, I would love to learn from them. And it doesn't matter whether or not they have that piece of paper, but they are entrepreneurial enough to put their stuff on the internet, to keep pushing, to deal with the fact there's going to be lows and there's going to be highs, and you kind of just have to keep sort of going and not burn out. So that's my little spiel on whether or not you should get a master's degree. And the whole thing is that there's no rush with those either.
Yeah, art always feels to me like it's a lifetime pursuit. Yeah, there might be some significant investments that you make along the way in towards your art, whether that be, say, a master's program. And is there a rush to do that when you're young, or is it something that you can emerge into later? I think it's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting question for people to consider before investing tens of thousands of dollars or taking on a bunch of debt when they're young.
3 years, yeah.
Yeah, it's when I had that choice, the choice was not really a choice because I just didn't have the money either, right? It was one of those things where like I got
Well,
in and
or
it's
you
like
can, yeah,
but I just like I can't afford to go and there's no
yeah,
options at me for that right now. And in the end, like years later, I kind of am glad that that's the case because a lot of, even if I did go and get loans and do this other things and stuff, I realize now I just don't know that I actually wanted to be an actor.
yeah,
5 or 10 years down the road, I look at the things that I'm doing now and I'm like, well, I'm playing D&D and that's sort of acting, right? Like you get to
oh, totally,
exercise that, right? And then I get to do this podcast and like I sell stuff in my day job and what I do. And so there's a level of performative, that serves that. And the idea of being able to make money doing something that's a little bit more authentic as opposed to just actually faking everything, which is what acting is, right? In some
yeah,
ways that
yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
aligns up. I did want to go back to something you mentioned sort of in passing that was really interesting. And I just wondered if we could dig in a little bit on it. What was this residency in making dragons in Denmark? I've just like you mentioned that in passing. And I was like, what is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so that it's called Gulliagard. It's an international ceramic residency where anybody can apply, right? It's super, super great. I like had a really strong ceramics portfolio. And it was all dragons. Like I don't know what's wrong with me. But
Or what's
I just
right with you.
Right. I mean, you're on
thank
the
you.
Nerdpreneur podcast here. I don't think there's
Yeah,
anything wrong with dragons
this
in
is the
this world.
audience to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of just like, so, yeah, basically, I was really good at sculpting dragons, and I applied around this time, around March time, because this is always the time of year where I just get stir crazy, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? So I applied, no expectation for getting in, but guess what? Sometimes you just got to do it. There's that 80-20 rule where you feel like you get shot down so many times, and there's a few times where you don't. You're like, oh, life is magic. So, yeah, the residency is great, like, I mean, it looks good on your resume, whatever. I don't think that's like a big deal, but I got to meet a bunch of amazing people. I stayed in Denmark for about a month and a half, and I had, it was in an old like orchard building where everybody lived. You got your own room, but each person took a night to make dinner and everybody would talk at dinner. And then during the day, you would go and you would make your artwork in the ceramic studio. And, like if I could find a MFA program like that, I'd probably go and do it because there was like no structure, but everybody was working.
Mm.
So it was very inspiring on that level, when you're like, oh, I'm not just like sitting and like painting fairies or like, doing this. Like other people are also doing it. So it was such a great way to meet friends from around the world to realize like, okay, I'm not the only one who is like just obsessively doing this because I love it. There's just certain types of people, and I totally found my tribe there. It was just wonderful. I could take a bus, and it was like an hour away from Copenhagen, which had so many dragons in it, and it was a pretty safe part of the world too. I'm sort of a goofball, so like I'm not super aware. Usually I walk around places when I travel and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is great. But in Scandinavia, it was cool because it's like just always safe, just
Mhm.
wonderful. Really, really fun. Really, really fun location.
It's that passive insight check, not
Yeah.
not always working out too great, huh?
No, it's like if you spend too much time in your head, you're not totally aware of the world
Yeah.
outside of you. So I would recommend that residency for somebody if like they want to go overseas, but they want to be totally like just chill. It was very, very chill, easy to walk to the town and get groceries. Like you don't need a car. There's places like that where if artists just need to shake things up, I'd highly recommend it for sure. And there's funding as well, so like you could work for like 4 hours a day or 2 hours a day and then it would be like covered. So there's always options like that depending on where you're at financially, or you can save up a lot of money. um Actually, yeah, I think it was, I actually don't want to throw prices around. Just if you go to the Gulliagard website, you can find like certain prices and stuff. But yeah,
It's called Gulliagard?
Yeah, yeah. Do you want me to spell that?
I was gonna
It's
say, like, do
No,
we want to
it's
ask anyone how to spell that?
yeah,
oh
I
my
don't
gosh.
want to put you in that position.
How many A's
Okay.
are in Gouliagard? I feel like
I,
there's got to be at least 3.
I feel like our listeners, I mean, you're selling it real nice. I mean, what's so cool is that you found this, like you said, tribe of nerdpreneurs, and
Mhm.
everyone's like pursuing this and resonating and bouncing, and the energy's like bouncing off the walls. I mean, that sounds amazing.
It's
Mhm.
totally yeah, it's very, very important. So, like, wherever you're at, try to conjure that sort of community. I sort of you met me at that, yeah, at that festival this summer, and it was so cool to meet artists there at that festival as well, that music fest, because it's so important to have people who are, just kinda doing their thing and enjoying life, and it is a rare thing, so when you find them, just have fun and do your thing and ride that tide because the vibes are actually real. They definitely are.
You mentioned in your story as well that there was a point where your field notes really started to take off.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what was that process, and what was the story behind that? How did you see this sort of start growing and gain momentum?
Yeah, well, okay, so the first field note I ever made was the green dragon, which was just me messing around in that residency, right? And that was 2 summers ago, so it was a while ago. And I posted it, and I noticed it got, like, a ton of and this is on Instagram, it got a ton of engagement, and I didn't really pay attention because 'cause I'm not a very I don't really whatever social media luck I've had, it's just been because of social media luck. I don't spend a lot of time, like, analyzing when I should post, what trends are. I just don't. I know that that would be a really good thing, but maybe someday. So it was a lot of luck and a little bit of that consistency, I would say. I realized that like, oh, okay, so I do these paintings, great. Not everybody's going to buy an original. Start making prints. Start making something that has a niche element to it. And I think there's so many people out there who love D&D or who love Magic the Gathering or who maybe are fans of natural history, right? And so I think that those field notes kind of hit that sort of need that people had where it was like, okay, like I remember maybe growing up and learning about polar bears or tarantulas or cobras, but to have that sort of information within like the mystical world of, dream and imagination, I think that that kind of touches on something. Sometimes I go back to like the lightning thief. I absolutely love that
Mm.
growing up. The need for mythology, like the purpose of it, why it's here, why we have a lot of interest in it growing up. I think a lot of kids really, really find fantasy appealing, and adults too. But I think that some of us kind of move away from it as adults for whatever reason that is, which is very sad.
Yeah.
But, it's nice to talk about things and be like, so if this was real, right? If a unicorn were to exist, what would the purpose of the horn be from like an evolutionary standpoint? Would it be used for war? Would it be used for protection? Would it, be used for noise making? Like what sort of evolutionary benefit would this thing have? But within the context of myth, I think it's kind of fun to play that game, to stretch the imagination, to just get people to think a little bit and kind of just go like, maybe. Like,
Yeah.
if that's where all creativity starts, in that storytelling.
And it seemed what's resonating with me is it's similar to the process sometimes of what a dungeon master or a game master might do in creating their own lore around, say,
Mhm.
a mythical monster or a homebrew monster or something like that, where they might say like, oh, I want this thing with a cool horn, but like, what would it be used for, and why would it have this special ability, or why would it have this magical ability so that it can do this? Like, and you have to, and it's kind of what creates the reality of the mythical, right? So that when people are
Yes.
immersed in your world of the game, they start to believe it and they start to be able to get fully immersed in it because it feels real. And
Mhm.
I think you're really hitting on something there within, say, specifically even the Dungeon and Dragons community that it really resonates.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Speaking of that kind of immersion level, you're clearly into Dungeons and Dragons. So have you perused through like Mordenkainen's or Xanathar's, the supplemental books much?
I have not, no. Most of my Dungeons& and Dragons stuff is very vintage, older lore things that,
Okay.
yeah, I know, which
Okay.
is so bad. I'm like, I know it seems like
No.
I'm really into D&D, but I am not as into it as you would think.
No.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their different level of like how deep they're gonna dive into the pool. It's
You know what's
all
really
good.
I just haven't met the right group of people. You know what I mean? I've been in
Yes.
a couple campaigns and then like somebody's moved or like the
Yeah.
scheduling doesn't work. You know, it just has to be like the aligning of the stars. And I
I
haven't
know.
found that. So
I know. Well,
I'm
okay.
questing.
That is a noble quest. Chris and I resonate with that. I bring up Xanathar and Mordenkainen because those are Wizards of the Coast did a great job of creating this immersive aspect of like you're reading Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes as if it's a tome that Mordenkainen himself made. So he's got little field notes in the sides, like that are look like they'd been hand drawn, or there's an assistant like small text note. And so Xanathar's does that as well, but Xanathar is that giant beholder that's like very evil, and he tends to like write things out like in his very selfish and like conniving kind of perspective. But what I'm getting at here is if you ever thought about, you know, at least reaching out to Wizards of the Coast because they work with artists a lot, like obviously, and having like these field notes, I bet Wizards would have a field day, excuse the pun, with having these like mythically themed field notes that look like Darwin himself showed up in the Forgotten Realms and just started to do this stuff.
I love that. I need to Google what was that name that you said, the Morton?
Yeah, Mordenkainen, he's like this very powerful wizard that's been around in the lore for a long time, and he basically travels the plains and he makes different field notes about, actually I can't call them field notes. What you do is field notes. He makes more like these little notes. And
Okay.
yeah.
I need to go look at those because I love that genre. I absolutely love that genre. I don't know if you guys ever had this book growing up, but it was published in like 1970 something. It's the Book of Fairies. Well, it's called Fairies, and it's by Brian Froud and Alan Lee, and it just filled with these awesome illustrations that have like handwritten notes, and it's graphite combined with watercolor, so you can see where it's like, okay, kind of has a sketchbook element to it. And it's like one of those things where like you look at it and it's just, mine's super old, tattered cover. It has like some stains from when I've put mugs of tea on it and everything. But like, you know, yeah, you grow up with these things, right? I don't know how long you guys have been playing like Magic or D&D for, or, you know, if you guys looked at those quite often when you were building your stories in your realms, but oh my gosh, like they're so cool. There's a purpose for it. And I don't know why people are drawn towards the things they're drawn towards, pun intended. But I think all you can do is really, you know, follow it and keep making it and just, you know, connecting with people who also see the joy in it for sure. So yeah, I should reach out to Wizards of the Coast. I've been like I've been lucky, and I think that that's the power of the internet just for exposure, right? Because like, I mean, could you imagine back in the day, you'd have to go to conferences and, you know, festivals all the time, which I think are wonderful in themselves. But yeah, the internet can be such a great tool.
You ever been to Comic-Con?
I have not been to Comic-Con, no.
It seems like something that you and your work would really excel in. Like I went there just this last weekend for here in Seattle. They have an Emerald City Comic-Con. There's like one in San Diego, LA, Seattle. They're all, I only know the West Coast because that's where I've always lived. But like they've got a lot more.
Yeah, well, I think there's a Denver one too. I'm pretty sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of artists there. Usually there's a lot of comic book artists, but there's also other people. Like one woman I met, she makes beautiful landscape pieces and she's worked with Wizards of the Coast for years.
Beautiful.
And this is like what you make, people would go nuts for there because I didn't see anything this last time, and I walked the entire floor. I didn't see anything like what you do. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that I have like a little niche in the market right now, for sure.
Definitely.
For me, what comes up when I look at your art too is the idea of an entire conception of an adventure where it's like, imagine the adventuring parties going through the Underdark and they find this book of, you know, Hope Christofferson's Guide to the Underdark, and it just has all of these unique monsters that you have field notes on, and then the adventure is like they have little bits and pieces of what are these monsters, and they're exploring the Underdark and discovering these monsters in their adventure as they're going through. Like, I know that
No, I
we're here
love
talking
that.
about your business, but it's like these are the things that come up for me when I think about the entrepreneurship involved in artistic creation with within the fifth edition place. It's so much
People like
opportunity
you
right
are,
now.
I know, right? Yeah, no, and people like you are definitely needed because I think that sometimes as an illustrator, you know, I make so much work and then I'm like, oh, well, now what do I do with it? You know what I mean? Because it's like there's
Yeah.
that whole other side to it where it's like, okay, what do you work towards? How do you synthesize all of that stuff? And my conception was like, okay, so you're gonna like turn these things into tarot cards. That's a whole thing that's been super popular lately. I need to get more into it. Like I've always had a set of tarot cards, but you know, I'm just always like, yeah, I can kind of, yeah, I'm not skilled in that, but I'm thinking that those as smaller cards, super great, really, really fun. You know, you can use them to like predict the future, talk about the past, you know, different elements of the personality could be represented in different types of creatures, you know, like a medieval bestiary style thing. But then the book itself, I'm thinking it's going to be called Loreland, just because I Googled it. There's only one place called Loreland. It's a little resort in the Bahamas. And so I'm like, okay, that's actually kind of a new name. I enjoy it. I'm going to kind of work towards that right now and just see where it takes me, you know?
For what book? What can you elaborate? I feel like we've talked about so many different ideas. I'm not sure what
I
book you're talking
know.
about.
Yes. So the book is kind of like my like personal project thing right now. Because I have some people who have reached out. There's a publisher in China, which, you know, I don't know how that's going to necessarily turn out, but they want to use the illustrations just in China for a lore like book, right? But that's also, I'm nowhere near that place. I need it to turn into something for me. You know, I like the story. I like building up some of the like background pages. I'll send you guys a link to my blog as well, where I did like a mock chapter of like, what would the story of the unicorn be? How would this look? So the book would basically be a summary of like, okay, why are all of these pieces collected together in a tome? And it would be very similar to that sort of like sketchbook where a time traveler goes back and travels around and looks for these mystical creatures. So you have like the handwritten notes, you have information like, okay, what's the lifespan of it? How big is it? What habitat does it live in? Et cetera, et cetera. You know, and then bringing in a little bit of myth too. If it's a creature from, you know, Babylonian stories, I'd reference that. If it's from Greek myth, you can pull that in a little bit. So there's you know, there's going to be some of that educational side where you can kind of learn about where do these stories come from, and hopefully at the end of the day it will inspire people to go read a little bit more. Like maybe that will spark somebody's interest in Egyptian myth if I do a sphinx, right?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, at the end of the day, that's kind of what's been brewing. And let me tell you, taking on big projects for yourself is so hard.
Yeah, it's daunting.
It is daunting. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But like I always had that where I wanted to do it. And I'm like, well, you have this opportunity. You left school because you didn't have time to, you know, do a lot of educational theory stuff that wasn't interesting. So now I have the time to do it. And I'm in a northern shining-esque landscape. So I kind of have like Jack Nicholson vibes going on where I'm like, I just need the inspiration to strike. And I sit at my typewriter and I'm like, oh, I need to get up and wander around in circles and pace. So yeah, it's been interesting, but I'm excited for sure.
I'm really hoping that we can connect you with a writer that does like tabletop adventures, because just this idea of what we talked about earlier about like someone finds the book, like Hope Christofferson's, you know, Field Notes of the Underdark, or another idea that I had when Chris was talking about that was, what if Hope, you had an NPC in the story that the party had to protect so that the artist or the, you know, the scientist could go out and find this mythological creature that is ultra rare. And so the party had to protect, but also had to deal with like the local population in those areas, but they would be on different planes. So you'd have like a very powerful wizard that's like, okay, I can get you to that plane, but then you have to do the hunting and finding yourself. So then there's like this Hope character that's like, okay, keep me safe. Maybe this NPC is also, maybe it's not the so like stereotypical scholar artist that like needs protection, maybe there's of course like this strength there as well, you know, the magic of the quill, kind
Yes,
of a
yes,
thing.
exactly. Kind of like I don't know if you guys do you remember Inkheart where like anything the guy would read would come alive?
Yes.
Maybe the quill, there's a magical sketchbook and they can draw things and that thing once it's drawn will pop off
Yes.
into the world, you
Oh,
know?
and
Like,
that's the
okay,
power of the book, of the
yeah.
things that you've drawn in the past. That's like every
Oh.
adventure you get a new like animus that can like come out of this book and help the party, but it's only like once every sunrise or something. And
Yeah. Yeah, I
so
love that. I
wanna
love
get
that so
yeah, wanna
much.
connect you with a writer. There's a couple
I
people I've
know.
connected with on Twitter that might be able to help out with this, but that's it just
I
gives
would
me
love that.
chills thinking
I
about this
know
stuff.
because like here's the whole thing. I love the idea thing, but then when it comes to okay,
The
I'm just not really a
execution.
writer. Yeah, like I love writing like little fairy poems, but I'm just like so I can do the visual assets and it's super great. But yeah, totally. I need to find somebody who's like on that level where they're just like, let's go on a hunt for mythological creatures. And I'm like,
It's
okay, cool. I'll
yeah.
illustrate it and you do
Or if anything, like making, I mean, your art is available to writers that want to homebrew at least, but there's plenty of people who don't like all the homebrew. There's plenty of people that want to have like the adventure in a book
the
for them.
structure.
Yeah.
Totally.
So yeah.
Totally.
Anyway, there's a Kickstarter opportunity in there that like Chris was saying
100%.
earlier with the OGL and all that.
I love it. I love it. You guys are so inspiring. I'm just like, these are the people I need to talk to. There's no nerds around me.
Well, nerdpreneur, we're like definitely we're all about like nerdy stuff, but part of the reason we created this was because we saw so many nerds that were actually forming businesses, and it's about turning your passion, the thing you love doing, into a viable business so that we don't have to work for corporations and have
Oh.
compromises and all those kind of things in terms of our lives. And I think that that's really a big reason why we wanted to highlight these stories of success where people have been able to turn that passion into a full-time income and show people it's
It's so
possible, because
beautiful.
we live in such a different time than we've ever been able to. And I think a lot of people want to say it's negative and bad, but I think there's more opportunity to do the things we love than ever before, and
Thank you.
find ways to actually make it positive. I wanted to ask about the tarot cards. So
Yes.
when you work with, say, a company, do they just say, "Oh, you make all the art and then we'll write it," or is it more of just like we'll print out whatever you want and then but you still have to do the writing of the book, because they
Oh,
always come with
okay.
a little book.
Yeah, so I've only worked with 2 companies, and I'm gonna start working with a third in April, and it always changes, but, I did okay, so usually they separate the artist, that you're not required to do the writing. They'll totally take like, if you have ideas and you're like, "So this is the sun card and this is what it represents," 110%, they'll incorporate that, yada, yada, yada. It really depends on the specific publisher. Like, there's a lot of variation and stuff, so if you are like working on a tarot deck and you want to do the writing as well, which I think is like really fun. I think that the history of tarot is like interesting. It's quite fascinating. It talks about all the different elements of the personality within like a court system, right? So if an artist wants to write it and they have a publisher, I would recommend just like asking the publisher. But as an illustrator, I'm not known for my writing. I was just approached to do the illustrations, and then they have a team that will even do the graphic design part where it's like formatting and stuff, and then they'll do the writing. But there's also flexibility as well. Like I've been lucky enough to be like, oh, okay, it's a human on the other side, and they realize that the artist probably knows, what would sound best and stuff. So if you're somebody who's like, thinking about approaching a company, or if a company has approached you, you'll likely get to have some say. But usually the illustrator is not responsible for doing all of the writing in
Makes
regards
sense.
to the book. Yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
oh.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a couple more things about, say, the more the business side of art in some ways,
Mhm.
and like what are the sort of main revenue generating, say, habits or things that actually create that you use to create your business?
Yeah, well, it's been very slow. So I want like people to like, like the build up and everything. And there's also low seasons as well. I think that it's easy as a creative on the internet to go like just like last night I was on Pinterest and I think I was looking at like Howard Lyons art and Wiley Becker's, and I was like, wow, they're just always producing so much. Like they must be, making and it's like, okay, I think that the most important thing is to just make your stuff and put it out there, and it will slowly grow. So for me, it's like a couple different things that are being kind of strange. So Etsy brings in stuff, and that's been super, super great. And then I also have some things where I did this like sticker club where they bought my illustrations, and then I get like a certain percentage of sales when they like create products. They'll sell them, and then I'll get some royalties from that. There is a cross stitch company, which is very interesting. Cross stitch is a type of like embroidery, but you, I guess, like follow a pattern. It's something that like a grandma would do. But if you're
Yeah.
young and you're still doing cross stitch, cool, awesome. I used to knit, no judgment. So that's something too where I'll have like residual income, just like little things like that, where it's like, okay, like even if I do no work this month, which I can't really do, I think I would have like a mental breakdown if I couldn't paint. But there's definitely periods of time where as a creator, you're just like, I don't want to make anything, but I have rent or like, I have a car payment or whatever it is. So doing little things like that, just having an Etsy shop, and, maybe like if companies approach you, if you have enough work out there and they want to market it, talk about, can I get some royalties from that? Because down the road, it's always nice. You never know if something might sell really well. It might not, but it might, and you should, as a creator, get part of that. And then also commissions too. Commissions have been a huge part of being able to, make a living. So I always have a few of those kind of brewing, whether those are like children's books or custom character design things. There's always little things like that as well, where, you pick up however much you need, where you realize like, okay, I have this much time. This is, what I want to save up for, like, these are my bills. And so that's been, important as well. And those have come through Instagram. And then, gosh, what else? I've done so many little things. Like I've had artwork in coffee shops. I've had artwork in some galleries, it's like a bunch of small streams of revenue that somehow at the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I'm supporting myself off my artwork. So
And then there's also
yeah.
you at festivals where we met, where you're like, you have events that
Yeah.
you go to, I guess, throughout the
Mhm.
year.
Yeah, totally. Not so much in the winter. I forgot about those.
Right.
So yeah, in the summer, yeah, definitely. So this summer, I'm like, I'm kind of thinking more so about finding Renaissance festivals and doing more Comic Con type things and just sort of meeting people at those too. I think that you make connections like this that you would have never made, and you can never expect them. It's just, it's kind of the beauty of the modern era, right? Like we have the internet so we can connect. And then we also have like these amazing places that are advertised via the internet that we can go and then connect in person. So yeah, getting out, being social, applying for those things, really, really important. Really, really important. Yeah.
You mentioned Etsy, of course, and
Mhm.
you're nearly at 200 reviews, and you have a
Yeah.
clean 5-star average, which is
Oh yeah.
amazing. And I wanted to hear a little bit about you starting that experience. And because I have personally never done an Etsy store, I've never started one,
Yeah.
I've never assisted in the creation of one. So I'm curious, how did that go, and what are some of the obstacles and learning lessons of that?
Well, something you'll notice is that it says my Etsy shop began in 2013. So I was like, I don't know how old I think I was 13 or 14 when I started it. And I was like, no, I was like on Pinterest and I was like, I'm gonna print off quotes and like I'm gonna like graphic design quotes on like Word, Microsoft Word, and print them off and like sell them. And I remember just starting the Etsy and just being like a super like little homeschool like entrepreneurial nerd.
Yeah.
That's so
So
cool.
entrepreneurial. Yeah.
I was just like, well, because I was homeschooled and I was bored and I was just like, the internet, very important. Like, how can I make money on that? I didn't do many sales until I finally like started to just make some little zines and stuff. And it was so easy. I mean, I've done Shopify for other people. I've done some web design. So like I've used Square and I've used Wix. Etsy is really easy. Like it really, really is, because it takes care of a lot of tax stuff. It takes care of shipping. And there's also advertising as well. So you can do some SEO marketing on Etsy. And then it's also reputable, right? So like people are familiar with that name. So it might make it easier for somebody to put their card information in on Etsy versus on a website, right? Fees might be higher, but when I was first starting, I was kind of just like, I didn't even have a website. So I was like, this is great. It's an online platform. So if you are just beginning, I think Etsy has all of that infrastructure and it's really, really cool. So if you want to run like promos or percentages off, it can totally help with that. And then just being kind to people as well. Like if you have a message, respond to it. It's kind of like I've never ran an Airbnb, but it's like it's just customer service stuff where I like to throw an extra sticker in and things are always handwritten. I try to make sure that things are folded correctly, just like basic where it's like, yeah, I want to take pride in it. I want it to feel like it is, a field note that's coming from, the workshop of a crazy magician and they're getting it in the mail. So, it's like that acting thing, right? That's one of the hats that I put on. It's like, oh yeah, now I get to send off magical, creatures into the world so that people can read about them and it brings some joy to their life. And yeah. So
Yeah,
I
something
guess
like it.
hopefully that answers your question. It was like,
Yeah.
went back to 2013 and yeah.
I love what you said there about it's kind of like shipping it from the frontier of wherever the field notes, artist currently is. They might be
Mhm.
out in the Feywild and it made its way through the plains and then it happened into USPS's hands at the very
Yes.
end there.
Well, yeah, because the owl got sick.
Yeah.
So I had to give it to FedEx. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So like those little personal hand touches, I think that is like a really, really cool thing, right? Because, we do live in this age where it is like, oh, everything's dying and Amazon is taking over the world and Walmart's bad. And it's like, no, like you go support small artists, like whether it's on Etsy or you find them on social media somehow. And then just like know that that person is taking their time to put an envelope together to maybe seal it with some wax, tie it and everything. And yeah, there's nothing like it. It's really, it's kind of an honor every time it happens. Like when somebody gets something, I'm sure you guys have like had that where you're just like, out of all the things on the internet, you got one of my things.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
Yeah, so just let that gratitude show through, I think. If you're trying to make an Etsy and you want people to review it. I used to write like little notes where it's like, can you leave me a review? And I haven't done that anymore and people still leave reviews. Because I think that Etsy will also send them an email, which is awesome. It'll be like, hey, write this person a review. Did you enjoy it? So that's another perk about Etsy is it like kind of encourages people to engage with you in your shop and be like, hey, they're not going to scam you. It's okay. So
Nice.
yeah, I love it. I love sites like that.
Were there any keys to like the SEO side of Etsy that you learned in terms of just even like naming your photos or your art or figuring out how to maximize that?
Yeah, I mean, so Etsy, if you go through and you make a listing, it's kind of like posting on any social media site. You can use hashtags, right? And those are important. You can also use materials as well. And then whatever title you use, those will be the keywords that Etsy takes and then throws into the advertising. I just started playing around with the ads. A lot of it's been driven by, my social media being able to like tell people like, hey, you guys know me, like here's the story. So a lot of it with Etsy is kind of pulling people in. And then I can't really say I'm an expert in regards to like using Etsy as like the sole way of, attracting people and bringing them on. It depends on what product you're marketing, right? So for my right now, most of it's driven by my social media, but there's also periods of time where I'm not active on social media and I'll get orders and it's simply because I have like a few Etsy ads running. So I do think that works. You just have to figure out, okay, how much money am I making? There's a price point with prints and with zines and with stickers that you just kind of have to play around with, honestly. And there's so many little things you can do to make it more expensive, right? Like it's like, okay, I'm going to gold leaf this, or I'm going to hand sign it. Or if you want to sell cheaper things, then maybe, don't hand sign them and, don't put a cardboard backing on. So there's so many different ways to figure out the value and what people are willing to pay at certain periods of time and all of that good stuff. So I've definitely had to fidget around with that a lot.
This is a very consistent thing we hear from our artists is around like how do you price your art or how do you think about that? And you've mentioned a few things, but are there any sort of keys or values that you bring to that decision when pricing out your art?
Ooh, yeah. So try not to underprice yourself, which is just the hardest advice ever, especially if you're first starting out, because, it's like, wow, I've never sold anything, or, like, what an honor to do this commission. But really, really, really try to just sit and be honest and be like, what do I think this is worth? And then have a conversation with the person before you begin. On Etsy, obviously, like, you get to set the price and everything. So figure out how much it costs you. And then how much your shipping is going to cost, your envelope, all of that sort of stuff. And then go ahead and look at what other people are doing as well for similar size things and compare it to that. Some people, it ranges from like $15 to $50 for like, 8 by 10 inch prints. And I think a lot of that is just determined by demand. Like, how hard can the artist push? Is there stuff, like, really engaging the audience right now? Is it a limited edition? All of that sort of stuff. So yeah, in regards to pricing, try to find an average and maybe start out on the lower side. I used to sell zines. One of the first times that I had like an Etsy like explosion or whatever, I think I made like, I don't know how many sales. It might have been like 50 sales or something, like in like a day or two. It was because I made a zine and I priced them really low, like really, really low, because I was like, nobody's ever gonna buy this. I think I put like $12, right? For a book, which is like a
Whoa.
handmade book. I know. But I was like, nobody's ever gonna like this. And then they sold out and I was like, nice. And then, I sat there at the end of the day and I was like, well, I'm still really honored that I sold that. And I still am kind of like that. It's probably why I'm sort of happy, is because like I definitely have like underpriced my stuff. And that's just such a learning lesson, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just such a learning.
It doesn't
Yeah.
quite cover the costs.
Yeah. But at least somebody got it, So the lesson
That's such a
that we
silver
learned-
lining. That's so I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
what we do.
know.
That's what artists do. We're like beating ourselves up, but like we can't just beat ourselves up. We've got to find some silver lining.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I want to be totally honest about that, because I'm like, if you've never messed up, then like, good for you.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm really proud of you.
Bitterly, really proud of you. Like,
Yeah,
how
it's
have
like,
you
well,
not messed up yet?
at least I have character. Like,
Yeah.
There's that
just
silver
like-
lining again.
Yeah.
exactly. Like, that's the whole thing. You have to have a sense of humor with your art and with
Oh,
pricing and
yeah.
all that sort of stuff. You really do. And like, you need to have friends to laugh about it too, because guess what? Everybody's been down that road. You're not alone. And like, I wish I could like give people like specific advice, because I'm like, I'm on a podcast and there's random humans listening, so I can't like say anything specific, but I'm just like, value yourself and do some market research and you'll be okay. And if it sells out, then price it higher.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a sign. So yeah, and then if it's not selling, throw out a discount code. That works too. Yeah, so just play around with that. So that's my little Etsy spiel. I recommend it. There was a pushback because of fees a couple months ago, but personally I was like, well, the amount of time it saves me, I'm going to stay with it. I think it's a good company. So yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was there a transition point for you in your life where you went from, say, doing a regular job or sort of a day job to becoming that full-time artist, where you said, like, I am ready to make that transition? Or have you always just been like, no, I'm making art, this is what I do?
Well, no, I mean, like, in high school, I worked at Starbucks. Like, growing up, I was always babysitting and house sitting and stuff like that. And then I got old enough where I could drive, and I was like, nice, I'm gonna work at Starbucks, because it was just my dream, right? And I was still drawing, but I was drawing, I was making art, I was doing little like Christmas sales and stuff while I was working at Starbucks in high school, and I would like take my art to like little towns around the Black Hills where I live. So I was always like I was always hustling. But I did have like that Starbucks job. And then my next job, somebody asked me to come teach at a canvas to paint place where I was teaching acrylic art lessons. So I quit canvas to paint, and I was teaching as a painting instructor while I was an undergrad. And I haven't had a regular job since.
Wow. So
I
you've been this
know.
entrepreneur for a long
time.
just
I'm
that
tired.
experience. Yeah. Isn't that how it goes?
Maybe I should have gone to school, but school was kind of boring. But like, yeah. So a while, Yeah, and I think that that's where the homeschooling thing came in because I didn't have like I had a few friends, but it wasn't like I was like doing stuff. I was like living in the woods, and my parents were encouraging, and I was like, I'm gonna start selling my artwork, because I saw people doing it on Instagram like a while ago, like 6-7 years ago was when I was like really watching like Rivulet Paper and stuff. Like I loved Lily Sika Jones, her illustrative like fables of animals going on adventures. And so I saw it on the internet, right? I was like, oh, some people are making money. My Instagram was just tiny, right? Like a lot of people's are, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how big it is. It's just the amount of eyes you can get on it, especially with Reels now. Yeah, it just sort of like spiraled from there. Yeah. So yeah.
How did this grow? Because your Instagram, you said it doesn't matter if you're small, but you now have like over 100,000 people that are following your Instagram. Was there some keys that you learned in terms of like getting to that level and size?
Yeah, so I'm sure other people have totally different experiences than me. Mine like really blew up just over the course of a few months. It was like the field notes were kind of taking off. I had been doing reels, I think before reels were super cool. And so like those brought a lot of eyes onto me, and it was just perfect timing. It was like it's kind of like one of those things where like it's like a domino effect where you post something and then somebody will share it and then more people will share it. And it was just such a luck of the draw thing, right? So it was like, okay, I saw that the field notes were popular and it was growing. So I was like, okay, I'll make more field notes, yada yada yada. And it was about like kind of seeing what that little niche thing is. So I would recommend looking at like, okay, what popular posts are doing well and why are they doing well? Was it like the subject matter? Was it the hashtag? It's probably the image thing, and making more of those, right?
We're going to go ahead and move into the random rolls section. So did you grab a D100 or would you like me to send you a link?
I actually have one pulled up on my computer.
Sick. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead and roll that D100, please. We'll do a few of these and then we'll move on from there to the rapid fire.
Hey, Nerdpreneurs. We'll get to Hope's random rolls in a second, but did you know you can submit your own random rolls and rapid fire questions for us to use in upcoming episodes? Just message us on Instagram at Nerdpreneur Podcast or tweet us a question at Nerdpreneur Pod on Twitter. If you want to email us your best questions, you can do that at nerds@nerdpreneurpodcast.com. Frank and I pick new, hilarious, weird, and engaging questions to add to the list every month, and yours could be the next one. Now back to the show.
All right. First roll is 54. Oh no, it's 81. Sorry, it's 81.
Do you follow any sports? And if so, what are they?
No, I don't follow any sports, but if I had to like watch a sport, it would be jousting.
Same.
Yeah, because I do when I go to Ren Fest, I do attend those. I think it's just wonderful. It's great to see, the pageantry, the armor, the velocity. Just sort of like the why are you doing this? You're like running giant destriers, right at each other with large spikes. It's kind of the most illogical thing humans could do to preserve the species, but it's done with such finesse and such organization, and it's so like simple that it's like, well, where are they gonna go? Well, they're just gonna collide with each other. I just think it's hilarious. So if there was like a modern jousting tournament that was broadcasted on like ESPN or whatever, I would totally watch that and pay attention to it and have t-shirts and memorabilia. But sadly that's not a thing. I don't know why. But we need to get back to medieval era society,
Yeah, why isn't that a thing? I am surprised that there's not like a YouTube jousting tournament or something like that,
We already watch people hit each other really hard in cages.
It's only a step beyond WWE wrestling, really.
Maybe there's like animal cruelty stuff that goes into it. I don't know. I think it's ridiculous. And if I had time, I would get into legislation and get it going. But sadly, I don't follow any sports. So
A vote for Hope is a vote for jousting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. You can be my campaign manager.
Exactly. I'll come up with all the branding.
You're hired, sir. Beautiful. 33 is my next role.
In the event of a zombie apocalypse, what is your plan?
Ooh, I used to read all of the Max Brooks, like the Zombie Survival Guide and World War Z and everything, because I was one of those people where I was like, if this happens, I'm gonna be ready. Okay, what's my plan? Dang. Oh, I don't know. It would be so like sucky. I think I'd just give up. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd like, I would just be like, oh my gosh, I'd be screwed. Honestly, I'm just already like, okay, like this is gonna be bad. I guess, okay, I'd have like, okay, so I get a boat, right? So I'd travel to the coast. I'd get a boat and I'd sail to like a magical island where there's a lot of coconuts and mangoes and stuff. And I'd try to just like live there like Tom Hanks, I guess, and I try to like make friends out of like rocks and paintings, and I'd probably get really depressed and make some great modern art that the aliens would find when they found the zombie world thousands of years later, and they'd be like, wow, this is really beautiful. Let's auction this off. And the proceeds from my artwork could then go to starting a jousting league on some other alien planet with other humans.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would be proud of my legacy. So if there's one thing that, it would make it easier to deal with the zombie apocalypse, it would be that. And that's, it's not much, but it's all I could ask for.
I love it.
That's great.
Finding the magic wherever, right? You got to find the magic. I love it.
I'm not in a warrior mood. I'm just already like, yeah, so I give up this.
Yeah, when you're this tired from being an entrepreneur, sometimes it's just like, yo, I'm tapping out. Like I've already fought a zombie apocalypse of my own.
Yeah,
like,
I know exactly. I'm just gonna eat a ton of Ben and Jerry's, I guess, and just like I don't know.
Yeah,
Until
before it
me.
melts, we're gonna just do the Ben and Jerry's. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Find all the Twinkies, right?
Just
all
hang out
right.
in the grocery store. All right, one more, please.
It is 27.
Any conspiracy theories you think might be true?
I think that there are like there might be aliens like doing weird stuff over Montana right now. Just because like I've watched the news a little bit and there's like weird things that go on in the sky, and there's like a nuclear reactor that's been shut on and off without like any sort of explanation or anything like that. So it could be like the Chinese government, but it would be way cooler if it was, aliens or humans from the future trying to like stop current humans from blowing each other up. So I think that might actually be true. I think that like aliens might be saving us, which is also glass is half full perspective. But I'm kind of rooting for that right now. I'm really rooting for that one. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Totally. And I also think fairy rings are real too. Those round circles of mushrooms that grow. I think if you actually fall into one of those, you'll be transported into the realm of the fae, and like you'll wake up maybe like a day later and 400 years will have passed on Earth. I think those are likely real as well. Yeah.
That's a great mechanic for the start of an adventure too. I love that.
Falling into the fairy ring.
Yeah,
Right?
and then all of a sudden they are like the whole party wakes up and it's like, oh, 400 years have passed and everything is different in the world that they left. That would be a totally cool homebrew to do. And now we're in the world of Hope Christofferson's,
I know. Maybe that'll be the color or the cover of the book will be a fairy ring with like a portal through it. Like you trip into it and you fall into a pond.
That's a great name for it, the fairy ring. That's just like right there. That's a whole adventure. All right.
I love it. You guys are so inspiring. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been amazing, you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Good. It's a good thing we're recording. All these ideas will be here for review later.
For posterity.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Future generations can take them because there's been so many. More than we can do in our lifetime, but that's a good thing, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Should we do one more random roll or?
Yeah, one more.
All right. 76.
If you were to turn a fairy tale into a Black Mirror or X-Files episode, what fairy tale would you choose?
Ooh, I love that one. I'm so glad we re-rolled. That's a really good question. Okay. I think what I would do, I think I'd go with Snow White, right? Yeah, I think I'd go with Snow White. And because you said like Black Mirror and like, okay, modern technology, and there's like an evil mirror. So there'd be like a girl and she has like a stepmom, and her stepmom is like kind of weird and stuff. And she's like one of those more so like influencer type women who are like always wearing face filters and stuff. And she would like stuff starts getting weird, and she like pulls up her phone and it's like the reflection of her like in a selfie because she goes on like TikTok or something, and it's like of her face, but it starts talking in like a different voice, and it like starts to possess her, and it's like the magic mirror but through like AI technology, and it like starts to pollute her thoughts and change her perception of reality, and she ends up like trying to like murder her daughter or whatever, and somehow like Snow White like escapes, and then she's put into, I don't know what the dwarves would be in this sort of situation, like maybe she goes and she's taken in by like a group of strange college student artists who are like, yeah man, we're not doing the internet anymore, we got to stay off it.
Instead we mine Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we would try and like all of those sorts of things. I would love to like take Snow White and like parlay like the magical mirror part and make it a commentary about like, vanity and the misconception of like, maybe importance and like that whole thing, because that whole story is like, it's somebody who should be protecting her. Her mom is actually super evil, which I'm just like, why do so many fairy tales do that? But I think that that's kind of a common trope in humanity where like, females can be sort of toxic, and then to look at like what social media and the internet has been doing to change and alter that dynamic could be so fun. But that's a screenplay in and of itself. And
That's
I'm just
awesome.
like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love the mirror thing with like the use of filters now too, because it's such a
great.
that's a great updating of that whole entire mythos. That's really cool. So
Yeah. Well, and then also there's like, you can like download friends, and people have been like dating people that are like actually AI programs and stuff. You start to read these stories and you're just like, whoa, what's the point? Like, it's so bizarre. It's like, it would seem like magic to somebody a few hundred years ago, right?
Yes.
But it's just high level tech. So finding that sort of convergence where it's like, is our technology going to become magic? And maybe magic from way back in the day was just highly evolved technology that we forgot how to use. I don't know. It's fun. It's a fun pond to wander into.
Yeah, the marrying of magic and technology.
Sci-fi fantasy. It's the future, guys. It's gonna
Heck
trend.
Yeah.
should we, on that note, should we do some rapid fire?
Yes.
Okay.
So moving into rapid fire, these are shorter questions, shorter answers. And if we feel like you say something that's right or wrong, we're going to ask you what you think. Of course, there is no right or wrong answer. Don't worry. And let's see. First off, I always like to start with is Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Okay. Fantasy or sci-fi?
Fantasy. It'll probably switch over, but fantasy right now. Yeah.
Favorite fiction book?
Oh, The Last Apprentice. Just childhood thing. I just have to. Yeah. Joseph Delany, Last Apprentice. It's about a kid hunting monsters in England, and he learns how to slow down time. Just amazing. Just amazing. I don't know if they're super popular, but they're one of those ones where you hold it into your like heart as a child, and still affects me. So then there's many others. So I just had to gut reaction Last Apprentice. Yeah.
Well, you are doing that. That's your life now. You are like,
yeah.
That's awesome.
I know, it's so great. Sometimes I'm just like, why couldn't I just chose like a normal job?
I know.
But,
yeah, the barista job. Totally.
Yeah, that's going to become a nerdpreneur quote, by the way.
Why couldn't I have chosen a regular job?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's but
good.
say lovey, it's all good. I blame the books. And I'm making more to infect more children. It's so evil, right? We're like viruses that keep going. 3
favorite pizza toppings.
Ooh, I love artichokes and mushrooms, and olives are good.
Do you do much singing? On a different note.
Why do you ask that?
Because I want to know what your favorite karaoke song is.
Oh, okay, yeah. I got into a little bit of singing this summer. Not very good, but waterfalls. I can rap.
Yes.
So yeah, I
That's
don't
a great
even know
song.
why I did that, but yeah, I can do that one. It's just something to pull out of your back pocket. I recommend every nerd has like a really cool song that they can just be like, so guess what, guys? Yeah, I can hit the slopes too. Like, yeah, let's do that.
I love how Frank associates like you have to know or be able to sing to do karaoke, because it's just like not at all the way it is too, right?
That's exactly what I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you just gotta probably drink a little bit. It might make
gotta
it
do
easier. Yeah, I just gotta do it. It'll be fine. Maybe once a year.
What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh gosh, right now I gotta say American Dream, Ben and Jerry's. I've been a lifetime fan. I think I already mentioned that's what I would do during a zombie apocalypse. I just buy all the Ben and Jerry's. But yeah, like a vanilla with caramel, maybe some waffle cones. It's pretty good. Followed by pistachio if I had to choose something healthier.
Healthier.
Yeah.
Hey, pistachio is better than caramel, I suppose, when it's put into an ice cream.
Yeah, no, the
it's a
just
step above.
I know.
It's small, but
Well, it's a diet day, so I'm just gonna do a pint of pistachio. So bad. Listen, I'm gonna get better come springtime, but right now winter's so depressing.
ice cream. No, I feel you. I am all about those alternative ice creams. I just wait for like Trader Joe's to come out with like, oh, what are they going to experiment with this time? I will try it.
Okay, there's no Trader Joe's in South Dakota, and that makes me so sad because even there, I know.
It's really like Canada. We don't have it either.
Wait, there's no Trader Joe's in Canada. Oh shoot!
They
Well, I
crossed
hope you
the
have some-
border for it.
Yeah, we always come down there.
Okay, shoot. Okay, well, sorry guys.
Yeah, not going to Canada anymore.
No.
Yeah, no way. Yeah, no need to. Yeah, just moderation with the ice cream. Next question.
Yeah, next question. What Hogwarts house are you in?
Ravenclaw.
Yes, me too. Although people
Yeah.
think I should be Slytherin, I definitely.
It's the hair.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a truth though. Like, okay.
Oh, that's so good. You just
Chris,
had that. You just had that like on hand. You were ready, just like off
I
the
mean,
cuff.
no, Ravenclaw is the best. It really is. Like we're definitely not in the spotlight, but we make things happen.
How many cats is too many cats?
I feel like 2 is acceptable.
3 is too many.
I feel like 3 is too many. Yeah, I mean, if they're like barn cats, then it's fine. And just make sure they're spayed, otherwise they'll get out of control really fast. But if you're living like in an apartment, I feel like honestly, like, yeah, I wouldn't want to. But I'm not gonna judge you. But I would just be like, I hope you're okay.
Once you get the threshold of like 3, that's where people start to ask that question, I think. Too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 3 is a little bit much. Even 2 is a little bit much. But I'm being judgmental. But yeah.
That's okay with cats. I don't mind. They're judgy creatures, so.
They really are. And it's like, so you have one, why do you need another one? They're not super social.
No.
So I'm kind of just like, are you like, why are you doing this? What else is going on? Are you using them for like ceremony? So is there something like going on with you personally? Like, what's happening here? If it's a rescued kitten off the street, I get it. There's stories like that, but sometimes it's like,
I feel
there
like
can be a
people
little bit too much witchiness.
I feel like people add cats because it's like, well, that cat doesn't like me all the time, so maybe this cat will like me when that other cat doesn't like me, right? So it's like if I have enough cats around, then I can always have some sort of cat love. But I am allergic to cats, so I have very little cat love, unfortunately.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry, that's okay. You can always get a hairless one.
That's just like
I know.
don't
Yeah.
know why anyone has hairless like pets. It's like, oh,
Extreme
I'm gonna cuddle with this
loneliness.
lizard. I just don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless it was a dragon, I would cuddle with a dragon. That would be cool.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm like, actually, like, I really do like, my brother has a pet python. So when I go and visit him, I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Like, for references, it's nice to have reptiles around for references. I don't have any myself, but.
Is a python really cuddling, though? Or is it just like
it's trying to kill you.
to eat?
Yeah.
Like,
strangle you.
It's just trying to kill you, but you're just like, this is so
This is so
great. At
nice.
least
I've never
something
felt
wants
so
to be
much.
close to me. Yeah.
It's like a weighted blanket.
Yeah.
There's some
Yeah.
therapy there.
Oh, poor humanity. Poor humanity.
That's why we buy weighted blankets, because we can't. They were
I
like so
know.
popular during COVID because people were like, I can't make contact with people.
Yeah, heated weighted blankets. You can get like blankets that are also like, they're warm too, and you're just like, oh.
The last question I wanted to ask on my end was, if you could work with any artist in space and time, who would you love to collaborate with?
Who would I love to collaborate with? That is a really good one. I haven't even wow, so many names. Okay.
And it can be it can be like a top choice.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be the one.
Yeah, no. I mean, I would really love to work with Alan Lee. He's still alive, but he's super old now. And I would love to wander around the woods and make a book with him and kind of just learn about his techniques, tell stories, talk about folklore. Yeah, that's who it would be. I don't know if not many people know him, but he designed Lord of the Rings. He was a concept artist. So
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
really,
cool.
really cool dude. One of those like under the radar people whose work has like been everywhere, but you don't know who they are. So yeah, I love it. I really love it.
Well, Hope, this has been so awesome, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you, support you, and buy some art from you?
Yeah, well, we talked about Etsy. You can definitely go find me. It's just my name, Hope Christofferson, which is spelled a bit weird. And then my Instagram is where I tend to be more active. The YouTube isn't up yet. My TikTok is schizophrenic, so I recommend staying off it. But yeah, check out my Etsy if you guys want some field notes, and then Instagram if you have like questions and stuff. I try to answer DMs when people are like, so what did you do to like do this and stuff. So I'm pretty active on there, and I love when people reach out and are walking the same path. I think a lot of times artists can totally self-isolate and feel alone and like, oh, that person's too busy to like even care about my question. And like, no, dude, like I would love to talk to somebody if they have anything like on the nerdy spectrum that they would like to engage with. And there's process videos on there as well. So I'd love to see you over in my little lore land of mystical creatures.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome. And as always, everybody, keep it nerdy.
Wow! Wasn't Hope awesome? For access to the full episode and another 45 minutes of our conversation with Hope, go to patreon.com/nerdpreneur and join the
Awesome Nerdpreneur Board.
Thanks again for listening, and keep it nerdy.